Hey friends, Seeking Our Spirits Back. This is Brett. Got another great episode for you. Got to sit down with a new friend, Monica Lindsey. Had a great conversation and had a good time. So I hope that you enjoy that. As always, I'd love for all of you listeners to come and be on the show. And the way that you do that is by contacting me at seekingOurSpirit@gmail.com. You can also call in if you don't want to be directly on the show and just tell a story and we'll share it. You can call and leave a message at 615-933-9737. Like I keep saying too, we're on YouTube now. So even if you don't really listen over there, go and hit the subscribe button. That helps us out a lot. And appreciate all the support and encouragement, sharing the episodes, liking the episodes, all that good stuff. Thank you all for your support. And we will keep it going. Enjoy. All right. We are live and rolling. Monica Lindsey. Appreciate you doing this with me, as I already said to you. But I'm going to repeat because I'm always begging people on here to come forward. And you and I met literally for like maybe 30 seconds not too long ago. And here you are. So Thank you so much.
Here I am. No, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear about your journey and your story. So why don't we jump in and just give folks an idea of sort of who you are, what you do, where you're from, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So my name is Monica Lindsey. I have been a nurse for, since 2012. So
here in Knoxville, or
no, I worked in Chattanooga for a little while. I'm from Chattanooga, and then so Chattanooga and here.
Yeah.
So I've been a nurse for a long time, and then I'm also a nurse anesthetist. So I provide anesthesia to patients getting surgery. Mm-hmm. I've been doing that. It'll be 5 years in August.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I have that, practice, and then I'm also a Reiki master practitioner.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And when did that start?
So let's see here. I guess I was sort of having an existential crisis, as you do. And I stumbled upon Reiki. I had an experience that was very life-changing and profound. And then after this experience, a couple of my friends that I worked with at the surgery center, they said, "Hey, Monica, we're going to do this Reiki 1 class in town. Are you interested?" And I kind of was thinking like, wow, that's a synchronicity. Sure. And
because you had already heard of it, or
I had heard of Reiki, and I guess I'll just tell you like my first encounter with it. I guess I'll just go through that first. So I was, like I said, having an existential crisis. I was really on this search for God. I was looking for God everywhere, and just hadn't quite found that yet.
Yeah.
And I was getting closer, but so I ended up going to Wake Foot Spa at Embassy Suites here in Knoxville with a couple of my good friends, and what they do there, they do foot baths and massages, and so I'm getting my massage and stuff, and the person who was working on me, she was a Reiki master. And at the time, I had heard of Reiki just in my own research of kind of searching and figuring out what I believed in and all of that stuff. But I didn't really... honestly, it kind of seemed a little out there.
Yeah, for sure.
I was just thinking like, okay, energy work, whatever.
Yeah.
Didn't quite understand it. But then I have this experience. So she starts working on me, and I start to feel this overwhelming sense of being held and just true comfort and almost womb-like. And I realized I had never felt that before. I'd never felt that safe.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful feeling. All of this, I was having a lot of like physical pain and just ickiness in my body. All of that melted away. And I was just, my anxiety melted away. And I'm thinking in my head, man, this is great. What is this? And then I start having this emotional upwelling. And then I'm having an emotional release, and it's like COVID time. So I'm just like silently weeping into my mask. and we're in this room with other people. It's dark, but still I'm just like, and we're weeping. Okay. And then that passes. And then I just go back to feeling held and just truly loved and safe and comforted and all of that. And for the first time in my life, I felt content. I didn't feel like I needed anything. I was just content with existing. And I realized now, you know, reflecting on all of this, that was God.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So, I don't want to cut you off. Was that okay? So I've got lots of questions already.
Yeah.
So, well, one, gosh, I don't know where to start. One, I had some very intense Reiki experiences as a young person. I can't remember if that came up the other night when we were talking. So, so I identify with that. I love the womb analogy, and I don't know if this clicks with you, but for me, my experiences with Reiki were I felt heat and pressure, but not in a bad pressure way. But it was this warmth and like just a pressure. Yeah, and so maybe that's the being held kind of part. And I remember when I opened my eyes, it was like I forgot that. Now I wasn't. I was. Well, were you in a Reiki session, or was it just
no?
Okay.
It just so it was just a massage.
Yeah.
But I knew that she was a Reiki master, and I kind of said to myself and to the powers that be, I just kind of was like, if Reiki is meant for me and it was good for me, I'm open and accepting of it. And then I had this experience, and I was like,
that's an interesting detail.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So she didn't know that, like, that you were sort of seeking in that way?
No, there wasn't.
Have you talked to her after that?
No, I reached out to her via Instagram because I was so fascinated. I was like, I have to figure out what this is.
Yeah.
But I never heard back from her. But then a few weeks later, my friends at the surgery center came to me and asked if I wanted to do a Reiki 1 class with them in Knoxville. And so I said, here it is.
Yeah.
And then I just went from there.
Okay. I would love to know if she consciously was sort of, doing Reiki as well in that massage. I would love to know that. But
I think so. In like how I practice now, like when I do my anesthetic work, I do weave Reiki into that, into my anesthetics. And I think, and I always kind of, I never have that conversation verbally with patients.
Yeah.
It's just more of a like soul to soul.
Yeah.
And
you're just intentional about that.
Yeah, I'm just intentional, and I just kind of put it out there that like if your soul spirit is accepting of this, it is yours. Yeah. But if not, that's totally fine.
Yeah,
too.
That's cool. So this is, man, we're gonna get so in the weeds on Reiki stuff, but without even getting into your story, probably. Yeah. So I have this experience with a close friend of the family. Well, my best friend, his mom, and she still is. I would call her like a spiritual director today. And she was into Reiki, and this was like, this is in 1996, and I'm just in high school, and it was being wild and doing all sorts of other stuff. And at the same time, I would have these conversations with her, and then I got interested in that. Like I could sense she would sort of walk by you and like sort of lay her hand on you for a little while and whatever. And I didn't know what that was, but I could feel something. I was like, what in the world, And so that opened up that conversation. And then she decided if we wanted to, and I don't have the terminology for this, but that, right, there's like that master relationship with a student or a pupil, I don't know, where you like are opening the connection between you two. I don't know if that rings a bell.
It's more like an agreement, I guess.
Okay.
And that's where I mean like I communicate like soul to soul. I basically open the door and lay the Reiki out for you.
Yeah.
But you have to step into it.
Okay.
And it's not something that is forced upon anyone.
Yeah.
You can choose to leave it.
Yeah, sure.
And that's fine.
I just mean that this was and this is a detail that becomes important later, but like, I don't know. It was at least in her describing this, it was like an official thing. It was almost ceremonial. Like, I'm going to establish this connection between us.
Yeah.
And so I did that. And I remember when I opened my eyes, it was like I had forgotten I was in this tiny room. You know, it felt like this expanse of, you know, endlessness.
So I think what you're referring to is just kind of in the beginning of a session where you do have that almost, it's like that sacred connection where you're just like, okay, I'm entering now, and we're gonna connect energetically here, and you're gonna feel me working.
Yeah.
And also I think that's just a way of just being like, are you ready for this? Is this okay? You know.
Well, we'll see if it comes up later. I might tell an addendum to that, or a little other explanation, other experience. But so I'm curious. Then I want background now, right? So I don't want to. Let's put a pin in Reiki,
okay?
And because I want to dive into that. But like you mentioned a couple things, right? Existential crisis, other things. So just what was how was spirituality in Monica's life growing up?
So okay, I grew up Catholic, and unfortunately, God was always presented to me, and I'm not. This is no fault of the church or anything like that. It was just kind of how it was presented to me, and like how my child mind figured it out and just took the information. God was presented to me as this kind of authoritative man thing in the sky that was watching you to make sure that you were a good little girl.
Yeah.
And if you were good, sometimes he would show favor, most of the time indifference. But if you were bad, you would be judged and punished.
You would really know. Yeah.
And so, you know, that really inspired a lot of fear within me. And I think as a child, it just really did not make me feel safe. And unfortunately, you know, God and spirituality was never presented as something to go to for comfort, something to go to when you feel less than, when you feel imperfect, when you need help, when you've messed up in your life. It's, you know, you could only have the luxury of God's attention or love if you earned it and you were good enough for it.
Sure.
And how many, you know, I was told lots of times that we're not even good enough for it, like in church. You know?
Yeah, and that's an unfortunate, part of that. Well, a lot of, I mean, it's something I say again and again, 16 years as an ordained person, and like the amount of religious baggage that people come with is just mind-boggling to me. It's like, wow, what is this?
Now I feel that my relationship with God is much better. And I realize now that I was told this version of God that really isn't true. At least I don't believe it is. And you know, God is nothing to fear, you know, more to just hold reverence. So I definitely have a better idea of all of that now.
Yeah. So you're raised in that traditional kind of Catholic system. What other experiences did you have building up to where you are now?
So, you know, had a lot of fear and didn't really feel very safe. And we kind of stopped going to church as a family when I was, I don't know, maybe 11. And that was fine with me because I was like, it kind of freaks me out anyways. I kind of just, as I entered into teenage years and young adulthood, I just kind of pushed it away because I was just too afraid to talk about it.
Yeah.
And also just afraid of even saying out loud, like, I don't like that. And like, you know, just being afraid of
questioning the thing that was presented to you.
Yeah. And just, or like, why does this have to be so scary, you know? And so like severe. And so I just pushed it away and I didn't think about it. And for a while, I kind of went on the opposite spectrum of things. I was just like, well, it scares me so much that I'm going to just refute it all and just kind of think like, maybe there even isn't a God.
Sure.
And but I knew deep down that I so wanted to believe in something, and I wanted more. And so,
And was that desire to reject, was that like high schoolish or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, I guess when I finally admitted to myself that like I was just, I think all of that manifested, right? And I was probably around 26, 27 when everything kind of came to a head. I think I had just kind of come to the end of my anesthesia school. And, I thought once I was done with school, my life was going to come together and I was just going to be just fine. That didn't happen. Spoiler alert. And so like everything was just like getting worse. I was having all this anxiety and I was just terrified of the world and just really just felt so unsafe and just didn't know what to do. And so I actually just admitted out loud finally to my friends and family, like, hey, I'm not okay. And so I started to see a counselor, and she was, it was a Christian-based counselor here in town, and she was wonderful, and she helped me so much work through a lot of this. But it makes me laugh now. Our first session, I go in there, and we're just introducing ourselves, and she's like, so what brings you here? And so I just immediately start sobbing. And I go into this like 30-minute, however long monologue of, my anxiety and all these things that are going wrong in my life, but I've done all these great things and why is my life all messed up and blah, blah, blah. And finally, she just lets me go. She gives me a lot of grace on that. And then I'm finally like calmed down and stop talking. And she looks at me and she asks me very directly. She's like, so how does Jesus fit into your life? I've heard a lot. And how does Jesus fit into all that? And I immediately clam up and I just get super triggered. And I say to her, I'm not here to talk about God. I am here to fix my anxiety. And it makes me laugh now because it's just so silly. And I'm sure she had like the biggest internal eye roll at that time. She's like, okay, all right, well, maybe we'll just talk about it a different time. And I'm like, and so, I go home and I'm just sitting with myself because I can't hide from myself. And I just get curious about like, why was that so triggering? And then I start to revisit a lot of, like you said, the religious baggage. And then I just finally admitted to myself like that this was the problem. I didn't have a foothold in any grounded, stable sense to make sense of the world. And that was affecting me very negatively. And I so much wanted that. So I went back and we talked about it, and I was just like, I so much want to believe, but I just can't believe in something that I don't believe in. And we talked about like a lot of the fear and just my history with the church and everything. And she was just, we both kind of agreed that it was just time for me to figure it out. And so I did. I bought a bunch of books. I started researching a ton of religions.
Exploring and seeking.
Like I literally got like Religions for Dummies in a book. And I just started looking into a ton of spiritual practices and religion and just trying to find anything to find God.
Yeah.
And
what do you think that is? Is it our desire or need for meaning? Like you said it really well there of like, from your experiences, like you didn't have a grounding or a foot on solid ground. I can't remember exactly how you said it, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's a hard question to sort of.
No. I think because we are so much more than our meat suits that we're inhabiting, and we know that on some deep spiritual soul level. Yeah. That for us to accept the idea that this is all that is, like it's just not enough.
Yeah, I like that answer. I mean, and when you say that this isn't all that there is, I know a lot of people go to like meaning afterlife, but I don't even hear you saying that. It's like there's so much more than just getting the good grades and accomplishing and going on your career path. And what it's like, well, but what is this for? Right? What's the meaning here?
Yeah. And even beyond that, I mean, I think there's just so much more than this dense 3D reality that we experience. There's so much more that we can't always see with our eyeballs that is at play and at work and supporting us and loving us and affecting our lives. You know, there's just so much more happening that we can sense and sometimes choose to not.
Yes, totally. And that's like, so I wish I could remember if I've told this story on the show or not, but I'll just briefly say, like, so that's what's cool about connecting on Reiki with you, that Reiki for me, with this little instance I'm about to say again, perhaps, was one of the most concrete, it's not concrete, but experiential, like
Tangible.
Oh, yeah, this is, oh yeah, there is all the things you just said. There's more than what we can normally, or what we allow ourselves to normally sense, feel, whatever. So the very quick version is, I was sitting at that person's house watching basketball with my best friend and his dad. And we're watching, not thinking anything about Reiki. You know, I'd done a few sessions with her or whatever. I was like breaking all the rules. I was doing Reiki on my own, on people, and like to myself and whatever.
You
like,
wild boy.
There was there was things that like I'm sure people would be offended by.
No.
And I have lots of other stories about that we could talk about sometime. But, and we're watching the basketball game. We're just being dudes and sit there, and all of a sudden, it's like somebody lit me on fire. I felt like I was in the middle of a Reiki session, just pressure and heat. And it was so much that I had to stop and ask them if they felt it. And they're like, we don't know what you're talking about, man. And many more details to this, but I'm leaving the house and I'm concerned about it. And I see her and I ask her, like, what in the world? Like, you know, I just,
and this is your friend's mom that you're watching basketball with. Okay.
Yeah. Well, she wasn't there. She was in the house, but she wasn't with us.
Okay.
But I was sort of freaked out by it, and I happened to see her, and I was like, what in the world? I feel like I'm in a Reiki session. And without going into the whole story, she, in her own journey, had an experience. She had been a practitioner forever, and she had an experience where she had a vision of Jesus. And, you know, when you get to like master levels, right, you're in Reiki, you're using symbols. So for whatever reason, for her, that started to not feel okay. And so like she had this experience to her. She
felt like using symbols was not okay for her.
Yes.
Okay.
Like she had this experience of Jesus basically saying, like, why are you meditating on these things and why are you not meditating on me? So that's her story, whatever. And she has this. And so she made the decision, I need to back off of or cut away from this. And so this makes sense now in the beginning, what I was telling you, like the way she described it is she had to break her connection with the various people like me that she had sort of established that connection with. And that's what I was experiencing that evening.
Kind of this byproduct of her meditative state.
I guess I guess that while I was sitting there watching this basketball game, she was actively sort of letting go of me in that way.
Oh, I see. She was like kind of severing your energetic connection.
Yeah.
So, and I think it kind of sounds like what she was experiencing was, I mean, I wasn't in her brain at the time, so I'm not going to speak into her life, but just from a Reiki sense, from an energetic connection sense, it's very easy to not maintain your self-care and to kind of rush through those things as we do in normal life. You know, like you forget to stretch before and after you work out, that kind of stuff. So it's very important to ground yourself and do the practices that we've been taught to sever connections once a session is over. Like we are not meant to stay energetically connected with our clients after the session because that doesn't serve, you know. You need to be reliant on your own energy. Because the Reiki is, yes, we are energetically connected, but you're not feeding on my energy.
Yeah.
That can definitely happen if you don't set it up set it up appropriately. But what you're doing is you are absorbing the Reiki energy that I am channeling through my body. That's an infinite source.
Right.
You're not using my energy, but it's easy to kind of confuse that.
Yeah.
And have that happen. And so severing energetic connections with each session, and just having that strong intention of like, you are reliant on your own energy. I am reliant on mine, and our energetic connection is severed.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. So I don't know if she like came from a different sort of teaching or instruction around it, because she used that language that was like, the master is connected to the person that they open to this. Like, so anyway, the whole reason I'm telling the story is just that it was that I'm a very cynical, kind of skeptical person.
Same.
And so I'm always, even though I'm a person of faith, I'm always just like want to analyze it all and be like, is this placebo? Is this like what? And that to me, because no one planted that idea in my head, I'm just sitting there and I feel it. And that was like, wow, yeah. There's, yeah.
Almost like, I may not be able to understand this or verbally explain this, but you know that it's real and that it's something.
Because there's no other way, I didn't even know she was home.
Yeah.
So there was absolutely nothing for me that would have planted like, oh, maybe I'm going to, and I didn't even know that was possible. I always thought you had to like have your hands on someone, like she wouldn't eat. So that was a lot longer than I had intended it, but,
no, it's fascinating. and definitely, because I mean, if you kind of dive into quantum physics and all of that kind of stuff, time and space are relative.
Sure.
And so that's why like prayer from a distance works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when a congregation gets together to pray for a church member, even when they're miles away, like it works.
I know. I've seen it's such a hard conversation, right? Because it also doesn't sometimes, right? Or a lot of times you could argue, but there's been some interesting kind of attempts to study that, where like in medical scenarios, they've also, I believe they did it it was folks that didn't know they were being prayed for, and they did all these sort of the variables and found, claimed they found results. Very interesting.
Well, so, I mean, there's multiple studies just out there about just intention and how you, even the energy and emotions and thoughts that you're focusing on something or someone is important and affects them. Just so there's this one study, they did it on rice.
Oh yeah.
Have you heard of this?
Sure.
Where there's one that's getting all of these.
It has love on it, and the other one has hate on it.
And there's one that's completely ignored. And from what I remember, the one that was completely ignored did the worst. Like looked the worst at the end of the study, and then obviously the one with the positive intention had like didn't mold or whatever, and then the one that had the negative stuff. But it was interesting because it was the one that was treated indifferently and ignored that did the worst. Yeah,
I've seen those things. So when you were talking about the counseling, is that when you were in sort of the depths of the existential crisis? And you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but was that all just kind of internal to you? There wasn't outside factors that were bringing you to that place?
No, it truly was just me, myself, and I. Like, and I say there weren't external factors because it wasn't something that I talked about ever. Like the religious baggage that I carried was from when I was a kid and younger, because like I said, we didn't go to church as a family anymore, and then I just kind of like buried that away. But yeah, and I think now I have I have a better understanding and appreciation for religion. I think that it provides people with community, which is so important, and then also just the spiritual practices. I think those are essential to your spirituality. Yeah.
The community one is one that, because I was raised in the church and was always in the Episcopal Church. And I used to always want to be like, oh, I go to the mountains and be with God and, that kind of stuff, which is true. And I sort of would, call everything that went on in the church as like, that's just a social club, but only now later do I see exactly what you're saying, like just how powerful and important it is for folks to share and to journey together and to, walk through those struggles or just have that support system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting that you say that, because for a long time, whenever I guess people would talk about God or spirituality, and I just always felt that it was such a personal matter, and mm-hmm. that I didn't need or have to share that with anybody. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, I felt that way. Mm-hmm. Even, probably up until the past few years, mm-hmm. I just, even with the Reiki and finding God and feeling a lot more stable in my spirituality and confident in it, it still felt like this very personal space that I didn't really want to share.
Mm-hmm. I get that.
And now I agree with you that is shifting. Mm-hmm. And I'm realizing that, community is so important, as, mm-hmm. We're not meant to do everything by ourselves, and we can do so much more together mm-hmm. than alone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That whole, I don't know, that topic is so interesting to me, because it's like, and I guess it sort of ties into like, why am I doing these conversations? I mean, it's like, yes, I hear that sense of, in me, spirituality was just, and I see this in your story. It's like you had this thing in you that was there and wouldn't leave you alone. It was a sense of something higher, something bigger, right? And I always have had that. And therefore, like, my spirituality is greatly sort of solitary, still to this day, even though I do what I do. But then there's like, I have these categories, like there's these other places where I see the experiential, what isn't spiritual, right? Like, I often like to use the example of, the Holy Eucharist. Well, that we've ritualized that, but that was Jesus saying, when we share sustenance together, this is holy, right? So I don't know. I just see all these different categories of how we approach and understand that.
I agree with you, though, and I think it's a balance, because you have to have that personal relationship mm-hmm. with yourself and with God to really feel it. I mm-hmm. think, at least I did, before I could share it and have a shared spiritual experience with others. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's a balance between the two. It can't be all together mm-hmm. or all alone. Mm-hmm. You have to have that solitude. You have to be able to sit with yourself. Mm-hmm. But then you also need to be able to know when to ask for help, and know when to connect, mm-hmm. know when to be generous.
Yeah.
So I think it's a balance.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it was just making me think about how starving I think people are for that, though, to connect on that level. On
the more solitude, the more solitary?
No. I mean, probably, there's a whole spectrum out there. And yes, a lot of people could use the solitude in the spiritual sense. I mean, I think people are more and more disconnected from community than ever before. But I guess I was just meaning, I look at, even in a church community, in a group of folks that are gathered around believing similar things, there's still a resistance to sort of vulnerably share these experiences of this thing we call God. Mm-hmm. Because even in like a faith community, like, it's like you're afraid like you'll be judged or thought you're like weird or,
Absolutely.
When it's like, yeah, but we're worshiping a guy that we said raised from the dead. Like, I mean, like everything we say we believe is not normal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually so refreshing. Like, yes. And I agree with you. And I felt that way for a long time too. And I feel like it's really just now, I feel like that ties into also just like living authentically and just being able to stand in your own power and stand in your own, like, I guess, moral code, if that makes sense. And feeling confident and grounded in that, and just being like, this is what I think and this is what I've experienced, and like, you can think what you want, but this is me.
Yeah, I always like that. It's probably I don't know, overused, but like knowing who you are and whose you are. I like that. Like, it's not just me. It's not just for me. I am connected to God and part of God, this thing we call God. Sort of always keeping those two things to me in mind of like, this is who I am. And then I'm a part of this bigger thing, if that makes sense.
No, I agree with you.
So I don't know, what else would you name any other experiences? I guess part of what I really enjoy about your story too is, and I wonder what you would say about this. I think I've had a lot of conversations with people who came out of like a pretty traditional, strong Christian background of any denomination, and they get exposed to Reiki, and then there's sort of like a conflict or like a self, like, is this okay? Like a fear that they're doing something wrong because it's like, quote unquote, Eastern, or it's like whatever, right? And so it's cool because it seems like that wasn't there for you, perhaps because your family had sort of gone away from that practice of church life and everything. I don't know, but
so right, my dad is probably, he's been super supportive of my spiritual journey, and I've always been able to talk with him. And I probably could have gone to him sooner, but I just wasn't ready to. And I was just afraid to do that. Not because I didn't think he would accept me or anything. I think he probably would have been like, oh, this is great, let's talk about this. But I just wasn't ready to do that at the time. But he's been a great support for me, and he's a great sounding board for me. And, we're both very fascinated just with spirituality and religion in general. And, we're always looking for cool new things to do. So, but when it comes to that conflict, I did never feel that, no. And in my own personal research, in my existential crisis, I found that there were a lot of religions and spiritual practices that I resonated with.
Yeah.
There, like, I think, like, Jesus was great. And I mean, during that time, I read the Gospels for the first time, and I was just thinking like, man, I had a totally wrong idea of Jesus, like he was all for like these flawed folks, and I was just like, man, he's so much cooler than I thought he was.
Kind of a badass, yeah.
Yeah, but then I do really like a lot of Eastern principles, and like meditation, and the whole idea of attachment versus detachment with our thoughts and ideas and emotions, and just our things, our physical material things, and
our intentions, right?
Yeah, and then, but there's also a lot of Native American ideas and practices that I find really great. You know, their love, respect, and reverence for the earth and nature and all living things, and how they feel so connected to that is beautiful. Yeah. And so for me, I feel like I don't, and this is just what I like, I don't want to put myself in a specific label or put a label on myself for my beliefs, because I kind of can't. Like there's so many that I think are of value and that I resonate with. Yeah. So. Yeah.
I identify. I've said many times that if it weren't for like my exploration into other religions, and particularly Buddhism, I probably wouldn't be Christian, because it allowed me to have a new pair of lenses to see, to see with this thing that had sort of become stale or that I'd seen my whole life. And so, yeah, I hear that definitely. It also, like, I've put together recently, in my own mind, and I always, I need to like take notes about what I've said in other shows, because I feel like I repeat all the time for folks that are listening. But I don't know. The Eastern religions, I feel like what is attractive to someone who grew up as a Christian is that, like, they give us the how, right? Like, they have very clear, here's the eightfold path, here's what you do, right? And in Jesus, there is that. There's the message of, like, it's in who he was and what was done for us, as opposed to, like, and it sort of is said, like, now live as I did. Well, that's really
broad.
Yeah. And it's hard to wrap your head around, and it's a lot. And so I don't know, I guess I'm just explaining what I think, why people, even from a Christian's perspective, are very attracted to those other systems, because it gives us some more tangible kind of like how to. And a lot of Christianity, I feel, and this is why I push on this so much, are the spiritual practices that you were mentioning. Like, a lot of folks don't even know those are there, but we have these practices that have been taught and handed down for thousands of years now, and so those are kind of the hows as well. But I don't know. Sorry, I'm just pulling all that together.
No, I think the spiritual practices are so essential, because we forget that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and we get so caught up in this 3D dense reality that we're living in, that it creates that mind, body, soul connection when you do those physical practices. Because I think a lot of times you need to feel these things in your body before you can feel them in your soul and in your spirit. Like, physically saying the rosary, holding your prayer beads, holding your rosary, taking communion, yoga.
Yeah, the tactile, the physical.
Yes, it's so important, because, even though we're spiritual beings, truly, our experience is not in the ethereal. It's here on earth. And so we have to be able to make that mind, body, soul connection. I think that's why the spiritual practices are so essential.
Yeah. And that's, liturgical churches like the Catholic Church, Episcopal Church, I think people fail to recognize it, but that's why there's the smells and the bells and the music and the pew aerobics and the tasting.
Pew aerobics.
Yeah.
I hated that as a kid.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
An uncushioned, kneeling bar was the worst.
Yeah.
Oh,
just to really get you centered into that experience.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
But you've got all that, your voice, everything. It sort of gets back to that idea of, like, well, yeah, maybe spirituality is really, it's funny. You can live this life and if your intention is there, then again, what isn't spiritual, right? Every experience we could call spiritual if you hold that intention, if you're viewing it with that perspective. Or you can just sort of drone on, and live everything and let it be sort of surface level. What else can you think of? So you, well, and I guess I also wanted to say, like, I love how that you just automatically, I guess I already sort of said that, like, you automatically, like, when you found Reiki, you're like, oh, there you are, God, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, because that had always eluded me. people in church talking about feeling the Spirit, feeling God work through them.
Yeah.
Even just listening to Christian music and just that singing about feeling. And I mean, I truly just, it felt like people were describing the color purple to me, but I was blind.
Yeah.
Like I just hadn't, it was so outside my box. And I had little blips of it because I had started a meditation practice. Before I had this experience with Reiki. I had been meditating for a long time, and I had little blips of that feeling of oneness and connection, but not to the depth and intensity that I did during that Reiki session. So, and since I've done subsequent sessions just with clients, I've had some really great experiences with people, and I feel very honored to be able to be in that space and hold that space for people. And I think, Reiki can appeal to anyone because it's not specifically associated with any religion. It's just a healing modality. And, so, it really touches on every facet of our experience, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. So yeah, I just think Reiki's great.
Yeah. What? Yay, Reiki.
Yay, Reiki.
Okay, so something I talk a lot about with people is what I call like languages. And you reminded me of this because you sort of said people's sense of that, of experiencing God in their life. You didn't know what that was. I mean, so obviously energy, physical sensation has played a big part. Like I would say that's a language for you. But or do you have others? Like once you opened that door and were exposed to Reiki and had that experience, like do you have other ways you experience God or other languages, as I would say?
I think one of the biggest ways that I think my eyes have been open to are just having faith and trusting that your best interest is at hand, and allowing and just kind of, I guess let me back up here. I think getting clear on your intentions and what you want out of your life, what you're wanting to achieve. And I think doing that regularly is crucial. It's easy to just get lost in the day-to-day and you're just like, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, follow the lunar cycle, whatever you want to do, quarterly. I don't care. Just kind of sit with yourself and say, okay, let's reevaluate. Let's look at, take stock of, did we achieve our goals that we set before? And what do I want to do now? And then just get really clear on that. And then just let God place these people in your life or these situations or opportunities, and just allowing for that, to unfold, I think is something that I've learned and I've seen.
Yeah. And that bleeds over into, that is prayer. Or if you want to put it into like more new agey, that is manifestation or intention, right? But it's all the same thing. You feel like it gets back to that energy you're putting out there. I love too the reevaluating and knowing that, because if you're not naming it or stating it or putting it out there, then what are we doing? In a liturgical church, it hit me really hard the other day that in some ways that's some of the power of what we walk through that story every year. I don't know if you remember, like from a young child in the church, but you would have done this again and again in the Catholic Church. Like you have your own year that is basically the story of Jesus. That's why, Christmas and Easter, right, are they? But you start in the beginning in Advent and you go all the way through it. And in a way, that's what I saw the other day was like, oh, if we are actually intentionally walking through this story all the time, then we are reminding there's preparation, there's for several things, right? But it's sort of doing the shadow work again and again. It's you're called into these different seasons every single year that encourage you to reevaluate, right? Who am I again, right?
And it just
what am I
forces
doing?
you to stay engaged and to stay mindful and aware of where you're at in your life. Because I think so many people get lost and they're going through the motions of their life.
Sure.
And then they wake up and it's been years and they're like, what just happened? And I think having those, and I think the spiritual practices and having those regular times to reevaluate and set new goals and keep yourself accountable is important.
And it's funny because it's like we saw this in COVID, right? That unknowingly that a lot of people switched after that experience, right? Because had that not happened and you had this like jolt, everyone probably, well, a lot of people probably would have just kept in that blind sort of routine. But it took a jolt, and then tons of people were like, why am I living this way, right?
Right.
And they pivoted. But yeah. Are there other, like, again, languages or
So I definitely
ways
think
that
like
you experience God?
I think the
these days?
synchronicities, of course, just like I'm saying, just, letting God place people and opportunities in different situations in your life. And I feel I've always felt very empathic, even as a young kid. And I was just very affected by the emotions and mental states of others, which I did not obviously know that at the time. And I think that's what drew me to nursing and all of that. But I think, which I guess is more of an energetic language, like you were saying, but I definitely feel very connected to folks who are genuinely interested in, like, I guess, like, having a relationship with me, like, whether, it's a friendship or like a coworker and a business relationship or whatever. And I just think, like, having that intuitive sense of being able to read and feel emotions of others has allowed me to connect with people easier. And also just to realize, like, oh, this isn't mine, but that intuition is, I mean, that's definitely experiencing this life beyond those five senses that we talked about, and I think, like, so that's another language, if you want to call it that I feel like I experience God a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, you walk in a room and just when they say, like, you can cut the tension with a knife, like that, those types of things, like, and you can kind of sense when something is off, or you can sense when, like, oh, this feels really nice. This feels really good.
Yeah, some can. Yeah, that's why I love to hear about people's ways of experiencing these things, for sure. What I lost it. I had a question there. Did we talk about Enneagram? Do you know?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So I'm a 6.
Okay.
I'm a 6. I'm
Interesting.
the loyalist.
I was just curious. Yeah.
So that skeptical background has really...
Yeah.
I put that to the test with all of this religion and spirituality and everything. So, I definitely didn't come from a background of just accepting something just because it was just as it was presented to me. I've always been very curious and just inquisitive.
Yeah, I guess what made me think about it was, like, because you're using it, almost sounded like gut language, right? In terms of, like, sensing.
Oh, right? Yeah.
And so I didn't know.
Nope. Head triad.
Yeah. Well, maybe you're just really a healthy 6, and so you hang out in the 9 a lot.
I definitely used to not be. I used to hang out in my unhealthy lower 6 era.
Yeah.
And I still have those moments where I definitely get in my head and I'm overthinking and overanalyzing, and I'm not going with my gut. And I think that's a way that I can check in when I feel like I'm just, like, running when the gerbils just going in circles on its wheel in my brain. That's when that tells me, like, okay, you need to stop and reconnect with yourself, with your gut.
Yeah.
So
That's good. And that's, again, where those tools come into play. What I'm watching your time. I don't want to take your whole night here, but what do you have? I feel like there's a lot more we could have talked about, but it's been fun just exploring this stuff. But do you have like any, I always ask people, what are your most profound spiritual experiences? You have any gems you want to share? I mean, that first experience was great.
Yeah. So I definitely feel, I don't know if I want you to add this, but I'll tell you.
Okay.
So I definitely feel that I had an experience with a guardian angel when I was a child. My brother and I were playing in the woods behind our house, and our house like backed up to the lake. It was pretty far away, but you just walked through the woods half a mile and you were at the lake. And so we were walking along the river's edge, and it was winter, so the water was low, and so there was this huge drop off from the edge of the land or whatever.
Shore,
and there was this, we were just walking back there. I was maybe 8 or 9, and there was this big tuft of grass, and I stepped on it thinking that it was the ground, but it wasn't. And I completely fell probably 7 feet and landed like on a bunch of rocks on my back. And, children being resilient, if I did that now, whoo, Lord, but, my 8-year-old self was physically, I was okay. I mean, it hurt, right? But we were far away from the dock because there was a dock right at the lake, and and we didn't see anybody out there. And then all of a sudden I see this man. He comes out of nowhere, and he comes splashing through the water, and he pulls me up. And I remember he was wearing like quintessential old fashioned like fishing gear. Like he had like what are those hats called that the Gen Zers are wearing? I
don't know.
Anyways, he had on like a hat with, you know what I mean? Like
the brim,
and he had on
rim.
like, like a canvas vest, and like I think he had like, like fishing line and stuff, and like the little feather, like the light colored feathers and stuff that you know,
like fly fishing.
Yes, and I just remember being like, who in the hell are you? Where did you come from? And he pulled me up, and he was like, hey, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. Like, my back really hurts. And he was like, hey, listen, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Huh. And he kind of like helped me get back up and helped me regain my senses. And he was like, you need to go find your brother. And then
your brother didn't see this happen?
No, my brother, of course, he left me. He was like gone. He didn't know that I fell. Yeah. He was just farther ahead of me on the trail. And then I'm like, yeah, he's somewhere around here. And I turn around, and this man is literally gone.
Whoa.
And I never saw him again. And then my brother came up maybe a minute later, and was like, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing down there? And I'm like, I don't know. I fell. And then, and I think about that now as an adult, and I'm like, any rational adult would be like, let's get you up. Let's
find your parents.
Call your parents. Which this was back before everybody had
phones.
This was like back in, the 90s. But still, he would be like, let's go call your parents. Yeah. I'm going to go take you home. Like, no regular adult would just be like, are you okay? All right, bye.
Well, and I assume it's not like he had anywhere to like disappear to.
And it was like, I think
in this open.
I want to say it was during like Christmas break. I mean, it was like we were out of school. It was like in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
So weird.
Not fishing season either.
So weird. Yeah. And like the water was low. Yeah. So it was like the weirdest situation. And I've always kind of clung to that. And I told my parents about it. And my dad was like, I think that was an angel.
Yeah. I love it. That's great.
Yeah. So
sweet.
I mean, I have more ghost stories if you're interested.
Do you really? No, come on. Now you gotta tell, give me your best one.
All right. Well, I'll tell you one that happened most recently. So on my Reiki mastership retreat, there was, and I have a picture I can show you on my cell phone.
I'm down.
It's pretty wild.
Let's do it.
So on my mastership retreat, we were staying in Sevierville, and we were at we were staying at this old farmhouse that was beautiful, and then the teachers were staying at this other historic house that was gorgeous. And, there's a bunch of us there. There's maybe 9 of us, in addition to like the 4 or 5, master teachers that are there. And the minute right when we get to this main house, one of the girls that was in my class with me, who she's been a psychic for years, she said, she was like, there's a young woman who keeps watching us in the windows. She's really interested in what we're doing. This is not something that she could have done in her time. And we were all like, about on par for Michelle. She's always that's just, she has that ability.
That's great. I would also be like, I'm sleeping outside.
and so we're like, okay, cool. And what's crazy is my other friend was taking pictures of the weekend with like her, like whatever Nikon. It was like a legit camera. It wasn't like her phone. Yeah. And we get this picture. Here, I'll pull it out right now. We get this picture where we're standing in front of this window, and you can clearly see this woman.
No way.
Yes, I have it.
Oh, I love it so much.
Here, I gotta find it.
That's fun. Oh, I'm that person that like is desirous of all these things, and I'm attracted to all of it, and I don't get much of that.
Here we go. And then, all right. So if you zoom in, so that's me in the blue, and then if you zoom in on the door.
Okay. That is completely insane.
I know.
Yeah, for folks listening, yep, there's just a definitely like silhouette, facial features, everything of a young girl in that doorway.
No one was standing in the doorway. Just people be skeptical if you want, but I know what happened.
So cool.
And we get this picture like a week later when she's like uploading her stuff. And I was like, hello. And it just totally went along. And we took this picture, maybe a day after Michelle had said that she had seen this woman in the window, and we were like, oh, this is awesome. And then we go back to our farmhouse, and I'm laying in bed. I'm sharing a room with one of my other gals, and we're in this old farmhouse, and our room is right by the steps, and then the hallway continues on from our room, and someone had left the hall light on, and it was like shining right through the cracks of the door, and I was like, this is keeping me up. So I went out, turned the light off, went back to bed, and then I start hearing these like continuous steady footsteps up and down the hallway and up and down the steps. It went on for 30 minutes, and I was wide awake, terrified.
Yeah.
And I'm just like laying in bed, and I'm like praying. I'm just like, whatever you do not come in here. You cannot come in here. And I got the sense that it was kind of like an older man, like maybe a previous inhabitant of the house. It didn't feel necessarily nefarious, but I definitely was just like, I'm not a ghost hunter. I am not looking to like...
Not interested.
No. Yeah. So like, I respect you. That's wonderful. Do not come in my room.
Yeah.
You can't come in here. Yeah. You stay out there. And I just remember laying there because, you always still have these like feelings of doubt and stuff. And I'm laying there in bed, and I'm thinking like, wow, I can never refute this ever again. I can never say.
And everyone else was asleep. They didn't.
Yeah, everyone else. This was probably at like midnight.
Yeah,
Yeah. And because I was just too afraid to like be like, police, wake up. I was just like frozen.
Yeah.
But it was bonkers.
Nice.
And then we get our little ghost picture there, and then I'm just like, I can never refute this stuff ever again. Like there's so much more happening out there and around us. That we just don't know.
I know. I love it. That's what makes things exciting, I think.
So.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
You're
I appreciate
welcome.
that. Those are both great stories. You got anything else? Any other?
I mean, we've got a few, but
Okay.
Well,
I'll have to come have you back on. Last little thing though, but like in terms, so stories like that in terms of just a God experience, like guardian angels, definitely in that category. Anything else in that world? Or in Reiki, like has there been any?
I think with Reiki, like that feeling of connection is so strong.
It's pretty consistent,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah. So there hadn't been any sort of like we would say inbreaking of the spirit in those moments.
I mean, I feel like the experiences that I have with people, they are profound. Just every session I have, which is it still like shocks me sometimes that I'm just like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this is even happening.
Yeah.
You know, and that we're doing this. So, I mean, for me, every session feels special and profound and like so awesome. So I don't really have like a specific right now.
Yeah. No, that's good. I guess part of the reason I'm asking is I just wonder, like, so like the story I told, I've had experiences in different contexts where it'll be like I'm in a Reiki session, but I'm not, but I haven't practiced that or done that. And,
So I guess, so like things that clients have experienced and told me is just seeing a lot of colors, kind of like dancing lights, and not just like the, when you shut your eyes and you see the back of your eyelids, like different, more of like the idea of these lights and colors and stuff. And I think just the physical sensations that people experience are pretty interesting. Like, and the thing that I hear the most is like, I just can't believe the amount of heat that was coming off of your hands.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I mean is like, I'll be, the example I keep using is every once in a while it happens, like when I'm doing the Eucharist and I can feel in my palms that same heat and that pressure. So I'm just curious, like if you've ever like not been in an intentional session and had experiences like that.
I hear what you're saying. I think that just kind of goes back to that intuitive sense of, feeling connection and feeling either connection with people or connection with God.
Yeah, because there's some people who can walk in a room and you can get that too.
Yeah, I think, like definitely like when I meet someone who becomes an important part of my life, a lot of times it's now that I feel like I'm more connected, it's within that first meeting that I'm like, okay, this is profound. Like this is like, and I think it's that sense of like discernment and trusting my gut and trusting my intuition is probably what I would equate to that. Or just like in a meditation, Yeah.
Do you intentionally, so like you sort of were naming this in that experience in the house with the steps, right? Like you were marking space and saying,
yes,
this is not allowed here. Is that something you regularly do or is that a common thing in Reiki? Like that you also...
Yes.
Okay.
So I always establish like safe boundaries.
Yeah.
I always like, I cleanse the space regularly and I always ask for a boundary of protection.
Yeah.
And just like ask and pray for removal of negativity, removal of entities or energies that just don't belong there, just to shuttle them out with love and respect, but just like, this isn't your space. And we have things to do. And, so I do that regularly. I do that regularly in my home.
Yeah.
But yes, I do ask for a boundary of protection and just, to only allow love, light, and Reiki to enter the space so that, and I think that that's something that's maybe like puts people off or inspires fear is that they're just kind of like afraid of some of these things because they think, well, what am I inviting in? And so, and that's really kind of if you're with an appropriate practitioner, you really you're not going to have that issue because it's truly all positive vibes and positive intentions. Even if you have an emotional release that you are uncomfortable with, I mean, it's needed, and I always set those boundaries of protection. And my intention with every session is I ask and pray that the client receives whatever they need for their greatest and highest good at this moment. And sometimes it is an emotional release and sometimes it's letting go of some fear or, whatever. And so I think that you can rest assured that when you are getting a session from a certified Reiki practitioner, you are always in a safe space and you are safe spiritually.
Yeah. I think so. The question comes out because I've I had some kind of freaky experiences, not with someone. It was, again, I was exposed to this very young, wasn't really exposed to any teaching or practice about it, right? And then it was like I was a kid with a toy.
Yeah.
So I was just like experimenting and stuff, and I didn't have any of that knowledge about setting boundaries or protection or whatever. And definitely had had some kind of scary things.
And I think that's, I also had a lot of fear of that when I was younger. And I know now that I am in control of my body. I am in control of my energy and my space, and nothing can enter that without, nothing can enter that I don't want. Like we are all divinely protected. And I think more people than we think worry about that.
Oh yeah.
And
sure. Especially in a like the Southern Bible Belt kind of Christian world, you're automatically already going, what is this? It's like Ouija board or something.
Right. And there are a lot of things out there that are kind of like you're just pushing the gas and you don't really know where you're going. And that's why you need to use your own discernment, your own thought process. If something doesn't feel right to you, then absolutely don't do it. But don't let that hold you back from experiencing something like Reiki, because you will never, if you are with an appropriate certified Reiki practitioner, you are in good hands. You are always safe. Whatever happens it's meant to be, and it's for your greatest and highest good.
Beautiful. Well, anything else you want to touch, add, talk about, notes that you brought that you want to be sure you...
Just in case I got nervous, I got tongue-tied. No, I think the biggest thing that I guess I want to convey is that I believe that there are infinite paths to God, and one way is not better or worse than another.
Yeah. Have you ever looked into Baha'i? So there's a faith called the Baha'i faith, and that's essentially, it's founded on that principle, basically.
Well, I'm going to look that up because that
Yeah.
sounds like right
It's
up my alley.
very interesting. Came out of India, I want to say. Maybe Pakistan, I can't remember. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. And maybe I'll just touch really quick on like what Reiki is for people that don't know what that is, because I feel like we've been able to talk pretty...
Yeah, we sort of dove in.
We've been able to talk about it because we know what it is. But so Reiki is basically an ancient Japanese healing modality where the practitioner receives and channels universal life force energy, whether you call it chi, ki, God, whatever you want to call it, channels that into the client. And again, Reiki works on and balances all facets of your experience in your being, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And just a little bit more descriptive of that, a lot of people can have, it helps with like physical pain, or it helps if you're recovering from an injury, it helps with that physical healing, and then also healing of those mental and emotional experiences, and then spiritually as well helps to establish that connection. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's even folks that like do massage with it, so it's multifaceted for sure. Great. Well, and then you've talked about sessions and stuff, and I know we talked before we hit record about, you have plans in the works, but can people contact you? Are you offering sessions currently? Or?
Yes. Okay. I'm offering sessions right now. I'm working out of my house right now. But eventually I'll be moving into a new space and kind of really putting myself out there a little bit more. But yeah, people can definitely contact me. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram. Monica Lindsey.
Just Monica Lindsey.
Yep.
Just looking
If you're interested in just talking, or if you're interested in a session, absolutely.
Cool.
We can do that.
Awesome. So if you're interested, find Monica Lindsey on Facebook or Instagram. Well, thanks so much again. It's such a joy just to sit and connect and, with somebody that you've never met before and get to dive into things that I think are exciting and important. So I appreciate your time and your honesty and openness for sure.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was an honor to be here. It's really fun to talk about. So
yeah. Well, we'll do it again. We'll, especially when you get your new space, maybe we can.
Yeah. Shameless plug.
Yeah. Awesome. Beautiful. All right. Well, till the next time. Take care.
Thank you.